Hello and welcome to the Pots and Trowels podcast. I'm Martin Fish and I'm joined as usual by Sean and Jill.
Hi.
This week I've been out and about up at Harlow Car in North Yorkshire.
And we've got a question from one of our listeners on camellias and whether or not to prune and when to prune. And we're going to be catching up with some of the things you've been doing in the greenhouse as well, Martin.
And this is our 20th edition of the podcast. So,
Yay!
Wow. And they said it wouldn't last.
and hopefully there'll be many more to come. If you've got a question for Martin, info@potsandtrowels.com. Just drop us an email. But without further ado, Martin has been to one of his favourite RHS gardens.
Well, this week I'm back at RHS Garden Harlow Car in North Yorkshire for another wander round the garden, which is looking marvellous at the moment, by the way. And I've come to have a chat with Paul Cook, who is the curator here in the garden. And it just so happens he's here, standing by this wonderful bed of winter flowering heathers. Hello, Paul.
Hello, I'm watching all these bees flying around and enjoying the warmth and these wonderful winter flowers.
It is amazing, isn't it? You know, because here we are, beginning of March, and already the bees are out, and they love it, don't they?
Yeah, and the heathers love our soil, so they've been here quite a few years. They're all AGM plants, awarded Garden Merit plants that have stood the test of time, and they like the cool conditions. They're in flower from pretty much November right the way through till April. This year and that they've been a real joy for the scent and for all the wildlife.
For people that don't know what an AGM is, Paul, just tell us what an RHS AGM is.
So plants that have undergone a trial at a garden usually, and they've been put through a sort of comparative test over a few years, and then there's a committee of people who go around, assess them for hardiness, flowering, pest and disease resistant, and at the end of that they get an award if they're good enough to be in the garden.
So essentially, if it's got an AGM, it tells you it's a good doer, reliable plant for your garden.
Yes, and the nice thing is the trials have moved around the country, so you might find in some parts of the country that heathers might be struggling with the hot summers, but they love our cool climate, so they really are a plant for the future in northern gardens.
Right, okay. So before we talk a bit more about the garden, because you've worked in horticulture all your life, so just give us a snapshot of how you got into horticulture and where you've worked before you came here to Harlow Car about 10 years ago, isn't it?
It's 10 years since I've been here. I always loved being in the garden. I didn't realise you could make it a career until I saw an article about two young people who went to Kew Gardens and studied there. So I had a few years in horticulture, working in a garden in Cheshire, and then went to Kew for 3 years to do the Kew course, and that's when I really realised I could make this my life, so make a living out of what I love doing.
Yeah, and you make a very good job of it, because this is the proof looking out here across the gardens at Harlow Car. So Harlow Car, the most northerly of all the RHS gardens. It's a beautiful garden. It's not the biggest, but it's just so beautifully laid out in a bit of a valley. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about Harlow Car and how it, the bit about the history of it, really?
Well, the nice thing about Harlow Car is in some ways it's not the biggest garden, but we've got variation of climate because it's in a valley, so the beck runs through the middle. There's a north-facing woodland, which is quite a challenge because it's quite a cold site, and then this south-facing slope to the beck, which is where most of the sort of floral horticulture goes on. So, and we've always been a trial garden, so we're constantly trying new plants, we're constantly killing plants as well. And the climate dictates what we can do, so the great joy for us for the future is just to keep trialling and planting as many plants as we can, so visitors can see how well they perform, and for the garden then to sort of show that maturity over the years. So we've got a fairly mature garden to play around with. The backdrop is an oak woodland, and that natural beck, which is a really sparkling backbone to the garden.
Yeah, and it looks good all year round. And of course, before it became an RHS garden, it was the Northern Horticultural Society, and that was sort of all merged. It's probably 20 years ago now, something like that.
Could be more than
something
that.
Might be more than that. Time flies. So, as curator, you obviously curate everything that we can see here, and you've got various teams around the garden, and you've got having, I know quite a few of the gardens, you've got a really good team of gardeners here at the moment, haven't you?
Yeah, and hopefully they have that space to be creative, because the best gardens are the gardens where you can try new ideas, and we've got some plants here that I might not choose if I was looking after that area of the garden. There's some quite bright looking heathers over in the distance there, But that individuality is essential in a garden. You need to have a little bit of a personal touch, and that's what Harlow Car has.
Yeah, and I think the public really appreciate that because they're seeing such a vast range of plants. You are a show garden, but you're not pretending to be a pure botanical garden in that sense. This is giving people ideas and inspiration that they can do on a smaller scale in their garden, isn't it?
Hopefully, and that small scale has been here as well. We've had sort of show gardens, demonstration gardens. We've still got the Hedgehog Street, which is 3 small gardens, illustrating on a small scale what you can do for wildlife. So yes, the landscape is the main backdrop, but within the landscape we're always experimenting.
Tell us a little bit then, Paul, about some of the projects on the go, because if anybody's not been to Harlow Car before, you've not been for a few years, there's quite a lot of changes happening in the garden at the moment.
There is, and partly down to the increased visitors. We're a busy garden, so we've had to put in new pathways, which is essential for visitors to get around, and we are installing porous paving, because one of the things here is, although we're not in the highest rainfall area of the country, when the rain comes here it can be quite destructive. So we have to design with the climate in mind. We have to design for visitors, and then use the plants as that sort of inspiration as well to meld it all together. But the stream side is a challenge in itself. So the stream side garden over the years has had various bridges put over it. It's had various types of plantings that have sort of been the Northern Hort legacy. This is a home of our Harlow Car hybrid primulas and Meconopsis. But we found that over the years it has had some pressures, either erosion or plants haven't liked the extra wet. So over the years we've been either building new bridges. In fact, we're looking at one building project that's coming to the end. Hopefully by Easter that'll all be completed. And once the building's done, then new planting opportunities that will be available for the team to sort of play around with.
Yeah, and you say a new bridge over the beck there. This is not any ordinary bridge. It's an amazing feat of engineering, but it's all being done. It's very sort of organic and traditional tradesmanship. It's not concrete bridge or brick bridge. It's all stone, isn't it?
It is. We have some really good local craftspeople who thankfully are very patient with us, so we work with them to design these. There's one particular chap, Dave Griffiths, who's done some of the designs, and then local craftspeople who do the dry stone walling and the stonework. It's a real art, and to have them in the garden, it's a joy for us to see them, how they've literally, this lump of stone has been built into this wonderful sculptural feature, and then they've worked with us to make sure there are places for plants within the hard landscaping as well. So, good local people who are interested in the place and making a real difference to the garden.
Just check, did he actually say that they killed plants at Harlow Car? I know they said they're doing trials.
There's hope
I'm
for
sure
me,
I
yeah.
heard him saying he killed plants as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a good point. No matter how long or how expert a gardener you are, things sometimes die. And one of the things that they do at Harlow
made
Car
it
is,
sound a bit more like you did it on purpose. Didn't
yeah, no, I'm sure it's not intentional, but it's all about pushing the limits of lots of plants, trying new things in different situations, and they are on quite a wet clay soil as well. So I think it's just seeing what will grow there. So they do kill a few plants, but there's an awful lot there that thrive and look amazing.
I was going to say, I've never seen anything dead as I've been walking around. I must admit.
Paul walks around at night and whisks them out of the way.
Yeah, torchlight. Yeah. Admit, I listened to this interview in advance, and I was walking Marley, and I'll be honest, was there a street sweeper or something? Because I kept checking on my shoulder. I was walking Marley along and thinking, there's some machine coming up behind me. I think it was just on the recording, wasn't it?
It was. What was yes, because of all the construction work that's happening at the moment. And it was sort of late in the afternoon when the public had gone, when Paul and I had a walk round. It was on the road at the back of us, but it was a road sweeper getting rid of all the dirt from the dumper trucks and the lorries and things. So, yes, I do apologise, but it just shows it was a real working garden.
I mean, talking of construction, the bridge that we were talking about, the stone bridge, that sounds fabulous. I think we've got a clip of that on the video recently, haven't we? Or have you got a picture of it or something?
I've got a photograph. Yes, I've got a photograph, Paul. I took one. It's been been built for now a few months, and it's all been done by hand. It's an amazing structure. It's called a clapper bridge, and it's not got any big steel beams or anything like that in. It's just huge pieces of Yorkshire stone that are put together almost like, not a cantilever as such, because there's big pieces going across at the base, but then it all tears up. Yes,
kind of like an arch kind of construction with a keystone.
But it's
and
flat.
All that
No, it's very flat.
Okay.
There's no archway. It's literally just a flat base to it. So very different to the sort of bridge you will see, but very cleverly done. And I was watching them doing the dry stone walls along the top that will form the sides of the bridge in sort of at road level. And the stonemasons were picking every piece up and trying it. And then if it didn't fit, they were chiseling it. And it's going to be beautiful.
Fabulous.
It's a work of art. Absolutely a work of art.
It's brilliant. I know this is an architecture podcast and we're a gardening podcast, but things like that fascinate me, because I think most of the days these days when you see a new building that's stone, usually it's only stone over the outside, isn't it? And they're still built with kind of breeze blocks. So it's great they're kind of using those kind of tried and tested ancient techniques to do that. That's brilliant. I think we've got a question, haven't we, for Martin?
It's from Sally. So thank you, Sally, for your question. And she says, hi, I have several camellias. One in particular is very overgrown, but I'm nervous about pruning it, as I believe in doing so I'll cut off next year's flowers. Maybe I need to bite the bullet and go for it. Could you advise, please? Oh, and she also says, I love your videos and podcasts. Many thanks to the team.
Oh, thanks,
Marvellous.
Sally.
So is now the time? Should she do it?
She sent some photos, didn't she? I just wanted to say, because we don't know exactly where she is. So just a little note to people who do send the questions. Keep your questions coming in, info@potsandtrowels, but tell us where you are. I mean, I'm looking at the skies in these pictures, and I think that's the UK, but, we don't know exactly where.
Grey.
Yeah, very grey.
Yeah.
Sorry, Martin, go ahead.
It's not from one of our listeners in California then with a grey sky, is it? No. Well, in that case, Sally, if it's in flower now and you're in the Northern Hemisphere or in the UK, then the time to prune it is immediately after flowering. So enjoy the flowers. And they've been in flower now for a week or two, some early varieties, and they'll continue for several more weeks into spring. So enjoy those flowers. And then the time to do the pruning is immediately when the last of the flowers have started to fade. And you can be quite hard with a camellia. I've seen them cut back to stumps where they've been really big and overgrown, and the gardeners have thought, right, we'll bite the bullet, we'll prune them back to a stump, and from old wood they will regenerate. Now, if you go so severe, it will take a year or two to get into flowering again, because it needs to sort of regenerate that growth. But if it's sort of a light to a medium prune and you're thinning it out a little bit and you're cutting some of the growth back, then you should still get flowers next year, because what it will do is it will make a flush of new growth through the summer, and it's in autumn that the flower buds start to develop for next year. So that's why we do it after flowering. It gives it a whole season's growth so that the flowers will still form. So you might not get as many flowers next year, but you will still get flowers if you prune it, in the next month or so.
Fabulous. And yeah, so just a quick reminder, if you want to send a question, tell us what's your name, where are you, what's your question, and we'll try and get it answered. Just send it to info@potsandtrowels.com.
Can I just go back to the stream side at Harlow Carr, because that is one of my favourite places at this time of year. Is it out yet? And because I know you talked about the primulas and the Meconopsis that are there. Is it a little bit too early?
It is a little bit too early. The candelabra primulas and the Meconopsis are sort of May, June time, so late spring, early summer. And the lovely candelabra primulas, and there is a strain called the Harlow Carr hybrids that they've developed and hybridised over the years. It's not like an ordinary primrose as such. It's got a central stem with whorls of these dainty little flowers, 3 or 4 whorls, hence the name candelabra, because they're in tiers. Beautiful sort of pinks and mauves and oranges and yellows. And the Meconopsis is commonly known as the Himalayan poppy. And again, a wonderful plant, likes dampish, acidic soil. So you can't grow it in all gardens, unfortunately. And it's got these beautiful sky blue poppy-like flowers that, again, they're that time of the year, late May, early June. So
quite hard to grow in an ordinary garden, aren't they?
we tried some. I mean, we
Yeah.
used to live near Harlow Carr, and I got some seedlings from Paul many years ago, and we tried some in our garden. But, just that 15 miles difference, the soil changed so much, and we were on very free-draining sandy soil, and they just didn't thrive. So, yes, you do need that moisture-retentive, acidic soil to grow them.
One of our older Pots and Trowels videos, I think, is when we visited the stream side, isn't it? So
Yes.
you can have a look back in our
We'll put a
past
link in the show
videos on
notes. Yeah,
YouTube.
absolutely. And do both those plants have AGMs then, Martin? Annual general meetings?
Very good. Look at you with your horticultural term. Is this an annual general meeting you're
That's what I
referring
thought
to,
it was,
Sean?
yeah. Is that not right?
Yes, and I ought to clarify that because we did talk about AGMs right at the very beginning, and an RHS AGM stands for an Award of Garden Merit, so it's not an annual general meeting. And yes, some Meconopsis and lots of primulas will have it. The RHS has various committees that cover all ranges of plants. I happen to chair one of them. I chair the Tender Ornamental Plant Committee, but there's a herbaceous committee, a woody committee, an alpine committee, a bulb committee, fruit committee. And what we do is we put plants through trials at Wisley or other gardens. Some are done at Harlow Carr. So the plants are put for trial. And if they are really good doers and they do what it says on the label and they're tough and easy to grow, then they can be awarded an AGM, an RHS AGM. So if you see a label in a garden centre and it says RHS AGM, you can be guaranteed that it's a good, reliable plant for the garden.
Does that carry across the other countries as well, or is that just recognised in Britain?
I think it's universal. I mean, it's
Yeah.
probably used more in the UK, but
Yeah.
it is, because the RHS are fundamental in the nomenclature, the naming of plants as well. So I think it does carry. And lots of plants that we get here, you can buy all over Europe, America, the world, basically. So yes, that AGM will follow.
Okay,
Fabulous,
good. Well, shall we go
fabulous.
back to Harlow Carr and hear more from Paul?
Okay.
So we're back in the garden now. We're just having a wander round. Paul, one of the other big projects that's being done at the moment and is all due to be completed later this spring is the Harriet Arms, which is an old pub that used to be outside the garden, but it's now included in the garden. So what exactly is happening there?
Well, the Harriet Arms is the hidden history of Harlow Carr, because you're right, it was a pub, but in the 1840s it was actually a hotel where you came to stay at Harlow Carr and take the sulphurous waters, because the link between the Harriet Arms and the garden was the bathhouse, which is the building at the nestled in the base of the gardens that you won't know the history of, but it was where sulphurous water was pumped up into the bathhouse. Used to come here, stay in the hotel, take the waters, and this is all linked to the history of Harrogate and how it's a health spa.
Right, okay, yeah. So that's how it all started. Now the wind suddenly picked up since we've got out into the garden. So if you're hearing a bit of a wind noise, I do apologise. So that's all going to be open. It's going to be a cafe. It's going to be landscaped. So it's going to be part of the garden. It's going to be an amazing new asset to the garden, really, isn't it?
It is, and where we stood now, that view was all hidden, and it's nice to have in the garden these wonderful sculptural features, and it really draws your eye, doesn't it, to that end of the garden. So, you've got the bathhouse in at the end of the beck, and then the Harriet Arms, and then as you come up the hill, and then you see the wonderful glass house, which is our home for our alpines.
Now you're a particular alpine aficionado, aren't you?
They are, yeah, my love of. I love all plants, but I love seeing them in the wild, and I've been lucky enough to going to the Dolomites and see these high alpine plants clinging onto rocks and flowering their heads off, in the wild, and to come here to Harlow Carr and see this wonderful glass house and the collection that's been here for many years, and to have a team of gardeners and volunteers who are really interested in alpine growing. And of course our climate suits a lot of these plants as well, so it's a real gem for the gardens and for the RHS.
And the glasshouse structure itself is an amazing one, because I remember years ago it was quite a small, low glasshouse, wasn't it, back in the old days? And this is, how big is it? And we're walking, are we still able to get in, or is it locked up now?
I think I've got a key.
Have you got a key? Good. If you haven't got a key, then we're struggling. So how big is it? Do you know roughly how big it is? Because it's big.
It is. It's over 30 metres long and 8 metres wide. And we have plants in there that have been grown behind the scenes that we bring out on a regular basis, but it also has the planted landscape, which is under the cover of the glasshouse. So you can see alpines under cover at all times of the year. But now we're looking to bring the alpines out from under that cover. There's a new limestone rock garden being built. The raised beds around the Alpine House are all planted with early flowering bulbs. So we've got a snowdrop collection we're just walking past now. So the whole area is a focus for alpines, and hopefully for the whole country, because there's so much interest in alpines in this area of the world, and I think it's a growing area. I think more people are getting involved in the small scale gardening.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
Yeah.
can take these ideas home with you. Some of these, although they're alpine plants, they'll grow in any conditions really, as long as you understand what they need, and some of them aren't that difficult, and you can get the results you'll see in front of you in your own home.
Yeah, I mean it is, and anybody wanting to grow plants, if you've got a little greenhouse without any heating, it's perfect for growing alpines. I mean, this is on a huge scale, but you've got a raised bench as we go in. We've just stepped inside now, and there's a raised bench, the sort of thing you'd have in a small 8x6 greenhouse. And I mean, at this time of the year, they look amazing. I mean, I know this is a voice recording, not a video, but you just want to describe what's on this bench.
Well,
Just
you
here,
have
Paul.
got the world on a table here. You've got in front of you a plant from New Zealand, which is a silver-leafed, low-growing alpine that hates sort of winter moisture. And then you've got bulbs from, that bulb there, Cyclamen persicum, is the parent of our florist cyclamen. That grows in the wild.
So that is the species that
That's the
you'd
species.
find. Wow.
And the original species was highly scented. It's sort of been bred out of some of the more modern cultivars, but you can see how the Cyclamen persicum started from, and then the dwarf cushion plants like these Dionysia, which will grow in the really harsh conditions in Iran, Afghanistan. But then the very straightforward plants like the Iphion, which is the windflower, the Iphion there, which is a bulb, lovely 5-petal bulb, very easy to grow, and and then the sempervivums, the house leeks, which are almost like you can almost, they're almost like tempting you to touch them, even
They
though we
are,
say don't
yes.
touch them. But you're allowed at this time of the day.
Yeah.
And there's the variety of shape, colour, scent, and I say the whole world is captured in this table.
And I'm just, my eyes drawn to this little cushion of sort of lilac-y mauve flowers. Tell us about this. Dionysia?
Yeah, so this is the Dionysia. So the Dionysias are very slow growing. They do need more specialist conditions than some alpines. They form a dome of leaves, and then at certain times of the year the dome erupts into flower, and the whole sphere is covered in flowers. And you've got a yellow Dionysia there, tiny little curvy flora, and then this cultivar here called Judith Bramley. So yeah, the different colour combinations.
And the great thing is they're all totally hardy and don't need any heat. It's just keeping the wet off them in the winter.
It's keeping the wet off them, yes. But I say there are some easier plants that you can grow that don't need those conditions. And the sempervivums and saxifrages are a lot easier. So next to the Dionysia, you've got a saxifraga there that is a huge dome, probably a 20-year-old plant there that we've grown over time and kept here. So like 12 inches across, full of pink flowers.
Yeah. Brilliant. And it is looking amazing. And there's colour in here pretty much all year round, of course, isn't there?
There is. We're still experimenting though. In one corner we've got a little cacti succulent bed, because we found, even though we're up in the wilds of North Yorkshire and that, the summers have been getting hotter. So part of the Alpine House is a cacti succulent bed. And it's another area where we find people have been really interested in growing them at home. House plants and cacti succulents seems to be a growing area of interest.
Yeah. Well, even Mrs. Fish is getting quite keen on alpines. She bought a couple at shows last year. So maybe I could give her a little area of our cold greenhouse and she could start doing what you're doing, growing them in lovely terracotta pots, plunging them down into a bed of sand to keep the moisture there. And that could be a new hobby for her.
Yeah, I mean, with all the spare time she's got.
Well, exactly. She's got loads of spare time, so I think that's something that she could be doing. Paul, thank you very, very much for giving us a quick walk round, telling us a little bit about your background. We've been before, we've talked about the productive garden, we've looked at the winter walk, but there's so much to see at Harlow Carr. So if you've never been, it's well worth a visit, and you're open all year round, aren't you? So there's always something to see.
Always something to see, and yeah, we only close one day of the year, so...
And when is that your birthday?
definitely worth a visit. Definitely worth a visit. I just wanted to say about the greenhouse size. 30 metres, it's about 100 feet. So 8 metres is roughly 25 feet, give or take.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a big space, right?
And a metre is literally 3 inches bigger than a yard, isn't it? I don't suppose you do yards, though, do you,
dear,
Sean?
No idea.
Don't
know what you're on
confuse
about.
things.
I just, in my head, if I need to go from metres to feet, I just sort of divide by 3 or times by 3, whatever it is. There's roughly 3 feet in a metre, like there's roughly 3 feet in a yard, is that right? Or is it exactly 3 feet? See, I don't know.
No, it's not exactly. A metre is 3 feet, 3 inches.
Okay.
There you go. Bear in mind, I'm a child of the 60s, so at school we were feet and inches, pounds, shillings and pence.
We're doing it all on today's podcast, aren't we? Architecture, mathematics, the whole lot.
Yeah, the old
Across
days.
the board.
Fantastic. Oh, dear.
But I love that Alpine greenhouse. I mean,
We call it an Alpine House.
Oh, sorry,
Yes,
an Alpine
not the
House.
greenhouse.
Oh, it's just I wouldn't say it's my favourite. I don't know. Maybe it is my favourite place at Harlow Car. It just feels so calm and serene. And if you can get in there on your own, you just sit on the bench and just enjoy being in that space. It's just lovely. Have you been, Sean?
I have not. I've been to Harlow Car, but I don't remember having been inside the Alpine House. But I'm just thinking of your idea of Jill having this as a new hobby. I think that sounds like it's a
Well,
winner.
Jill, when we were working at various flower shows last year, you took an interest in some of the Alpine stands. I mean, I like them, but it's never been a big thing for me. I can appreciate their beauty, and they are fascinating plants. And the Alpine House there is amazing. It really is. But you bought a few little Alpines at the shows last year.
Well, I
didn't you?
did, and we've just put them into one of our little sinks. We've got an old stone sink, haven't we? And they're in there for now. But it would be something I'd quite like to do a bit more of. But when Paul was listing all those names of Alpine, I recognised about one of them when he said Sempervivum. I thought, oh, I know that
Yeah,
one.
I've heard of that one. Well, we did a very similar thing. We've got a Belfast sink in the garden and it's got Alpines in it. We did it years ago. But I don't think I've looked at it since. It was one of this would be a great idea to use this Belfast sink.
Yeah. Bit of gravel.
Yeah.
That's right.
Have you been here?
Skern Alpines are one of our sort of favourite nurseries, aren't they, that do Alpines at the shows. And I know we did a Pots and Trowels video with Skern, didn't we, as well? So we're crossing over
Absolutely,
Crossing the
yes.
street.
a
yes.
few areas today, aren't
Well,
we?
I know what to get you now for birthdays and Christmas
Yeah.
presents and wedding anniversaries. An Alpine.
Well, he did mention he'd been. Paul mentioned he'd been to Dolomites to see the Alpines, in situ. And not that I'm trying to cross more streams, but as a very keen fan of winter sports, I think I need to go on a special trip to the Dolomites. And not winter sports,
June.
obviously Alpines. Sorry, Alpines.
Yes, I think you do. And I'm told, I've never been, but I know people that have been to the sort of these Alpine region. I think sort of late May, June is when they are at their best. So yes, that's
Snow
it.
conditions
We
are
can go
also
on.
good then, though, Mark. That's the only problem.
No, that's true. No, but
Anyway, have we got some jobs we should be doing in our gardens at the minute?
yes, we have. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, first of all, just a little catch up because we sowed some sweet peas. We chatted about them last week. It was King's Coronation, King's Ransom, and Gilly. They were the two king ones in there. And they are now through. I've been in the greenhouse this morning and I've got these lovely little shoots. Pots full of little seedlings, which are looking great. So they've come through in good time and a really good take on the seed germination, which is fantastic. And I've been pricking out the tomato seedlings. These are Tigerella that we sowed again about 3 weeks ago in the greenhouse, probably a little bit more. Lovely strong seedlings. In fact, what I'm going to do, because I put a picture on Facebook and I've had one or two people asking about when and how to prick out. So I think we might do a little video just purely on pricking out, just to give a few pointers to show people how to do that. Lots of other sowing I'm going to be doing as well. We put some dahlias in this week in the glass house to grow for cut flower. Leeks will be going in. I'm going to be starting more of the veg sowing this week in the glass house in modules. It's still a little bit too cold and wet for us to do it outside in the garden here. And Jill and I have been out in the garden on one of the few fine days we've had.
It was lovely though.
It was lovely.
So nice.
And we finished tidying the border. We cut the herbaceous border down a few weeks ago, which again, we keep mentioning, but that's on a video as well, isn't it? But we hadn't done the grasses, so we decided now is time. So the miscanthus, the calamagrostis, the deciduous grasses have all been cut down, and we've forked through the border, tickled over, and it looks so much better for that.
And the
little
edges,
bit of a tin.
I did the edges.
You did. You're the queen of
I am
edging.
a bit of an
You are.
edging queen, but I think if you just do one job, well, we often say if you just do one job and make the garden look a bit better, is do the lawn edges, and it does look really good now. You risked it with the Verbena bonariensis.
I've not
didn't
cut
you?
it
You were
all
a
the
bit-
way down. I've gone
Okay.
halfway.
Right.
I can just see some little shoots growing at the base, so I'm going to leave that another week or two. in
because there
case-
might be a frost.
Well, a little frost won't, but if we suddenly get a blast from the east and
Okay.
we get those sub-zero, which I don't think we will, but I'll leave it a week or two, then that can go down even harder.
Okay.
Okay, so I've got a list of novice questions now. So rewinding back to pricking out. What's pricking out? That's when you take a seedling and you put it in a bigger pot. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. So you sow the seeds in pots or trays, and they're all very close together, and it's that transplanting them into a smaller pot or a bigger seed tray to grow on. So you are transplanting them individually, and it's quite important that you do it right depth, handle them correctly at the right stage. So hence the reason we need to do something on that.
And then my other question for the edging queen, maybe, but is so I've seen lawn, and maybe this is kind of a lawn kind of care special that we need to think about down the line, but I've seen lawns where the grass kind of stops and the border starts. I've seen lawns where there's like a little moat or a trench almost kind of at the edge of the lawn where it's
Yeah.
kind of like stands tall. I've seen all sorts of different edges. Is there any reason for that, or is it just personal preference? What's the deal there?
Well, it is personal preference, yes, and I just think it makes life easier if the lawn has got a good edge to it. So yeah, I use a half moon, which is literally how would you describe it?
A sort of
a half moon
semicircle
shape
shaped.
on
Yeah, I've seen
a
it.
blade.
Yeah.
So that I use that just to make sure the edge is nice and straight, and then I use some edging shears which will just trim the grass away. But I do just where the soil of the border starts, I'll just flick that away from the lawn edge a little bit, so there is a bit of a gully, and then it just makes life easier for then cutting the edge of the lawn again in future occasions.
My lawn's quite
I
small,
do
so
it
I'm thinking
because-
every time I'd edge it, it'd be just getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller
Yeah.
until I was left with like little postage.
No, but you don't cut back with the half moon every time.
No.
You do that sort of this time of the
Usually
year.
once at the start of the season,
Yeah.
that'll do it. And then if you use your hoe, then you can keep on top of it and just flick the soil away with the hoe. So yeah, just at the beginning of the season.
We once, in our old garden, we had a group of, they were Americans, weren't they,
Yeah.
doing a tour of gardens in the north of England, and they were brought to look at our garden, and they were fascinated by Jill's edging, and because they said the edges look so amazing. So you actually finished up doing a little demonstration for them, and just to show them how
Let's
to
go
do
on
it.
tour in North America with the
I
Pots
think
Trowels
that's
edging.
it. Yes, the edging tour.
Yeah.
Can I carry your hoe with you?
Yes, you can. Yeah.
I'll have to come and film it. Fantastic.
Exactly.
That's about all we have time for this week. Remember, if you want to drop us a question, info@potsandtrowels.com, or just leave us a comment. And if you've got a couple of moments to leave us a review, we really appreciate it. It just helps the podcast reach that few more people. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and we'll be back again next week, so we'll see you then.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Watch the videos on YouTube or Facebook, follow us on Instagram, Twitter or X, and subscribe to the podcast and never miss a thing. For more information, go to potsandtrowels.com.